On mine?
Same too. All right. So I guess we can
Yep,
double
go
checking.
ahead.
We can get started. Um, okay. So I'm actually super excited on a personal level about tonight because workers' rights is something that I find incredibly interesting and unions. So I'm super excited that we've got Mike Raikes, who is head of the IBEW, and Anthony Walraven, who is part of Asks Me. I'm probably saying that wrong. Um,
Pretty close.
Okay,
Yep.
also workers' rights. Both of them are deeply involved in it, and I'm super interested to see how people in the community can get more involved and to hear about how Karla is going to improve workers' rights for people here in the district 88. All right.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Blair. All right. Welcome, everybody. For people who don't know me yet or haven't looked around on my website to see about my background, um, after I finished grad school, I moved to the New York City area, and I was able to join United Scenic Artists Local 829, and I painted scenery for film and television and Broadway. And within the first year of being in the union, I, we had a strike, and I spent time on the picket line, and then I spent time negotiating our new contract with the Broadway scene shops. And that was I was only 26 years old, and it was an experience I will never forget. And I really understand how important it is to have good wages, good hours that make sense for the work that you're doing, and breaks and safety. I got some really great safety training when I was in the union that I also still remember to this day, and take care when I'm doing my own independent work. I'm just a self-employed painter now here in Bloomington. So my first guest is Mike Rakes, who is the business manager. Is that your title, right?
That's correct.
Business manager with IBEW. Um, Thank you so much for joining us, Mike. And go ahead and say a little bit more about your role and what your union members do here in our community.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for hosting me this evening, Karla, and giving me opportunity to tell a little bit about our story.
Mhm.
So we are located in Bloomington in McLean County. We have 300 union electricians. It goes up and down a little bit with retirement and bringing in new apprentices, so it fluctuates a little bit, but we're usually about that 300 member range. We've got our electricians work on electric signs. We work on low voltage systems, which is voice, data, and video systems, network cabling, phone security, fire alarms. And then our electricians work in residential homes, commercial buildings, and any industrial plants. The colleges around McLean County, Illinois State, Heartland, um, Illinois Wesleyan, were pretty much, they're all our customers.
Okay. All right. Great. And uh, do you offer training for people of any age, or do you just take young people out of high school? How does that work?
Well, that's a great question. You have to be 18 to
Hmm.
get a job
Hmm.
with us. And so you apply for the apprenticeship, and we have two different apprenticeships. One is the 3 year, which is the voice, data and video apprenticeship, and the other is the inside wireman construction program. That's a 5 year program. We have people anywhere from 18. Actually, you can apply at 17. You can't take a job till you're 18. We
Okay.
have some people who are seniors in high school getting ready to graduate in the spring. So
Hmm.
around February is when we do our interviews. They'll come in, interview. Matter of fact, this year we are waiting on a person to turn 18 so he can start a job. So,
Nice.
and then the opposite end of the spectrum, We have people in our 40s up to, I think, our late 40s. Obviously, you can apply at any age, but I think right now, late 40s, just starting an apprenticeship. So it's a wide range of ages that we have.
That's great. I'm glad to hear that. So another question I wanted to ask you is, just thinking about visibility of unions and the fact that we don't really necessarily think about our union members in our community until they strike. And then all of a sudden everybody knows, oh, look at those union guys, look what they're doing. Have you ever has IBEW ever run a strike in your time?
Yeah, so what we have done is had pickets, and basically our pickets are giving the public notice that either an employer is not paying the area standards, is what we call it, and so their workers are doing the same work that our men and women are doing, and they're being exploited. And so we want to let the public know that, whatever business it is, they are allowing a contractor to come into our community or be a part of our community, and they're exploiting workers. So those are mainly the type of pickets that we use. And yes, we've used them quite often in the past. We haven't had one up in a little bit, but we just want to get the message out and let the public know what's going on.
Right.
It brings awareness, and then all of a sudden people are aware of the situation.
Yeah, so just a few weeks ago, I joined some of your members in front of the BCPA, and the message really was hire local. It wasn't a strike. It was just kind of a public information, reminding people to hire local. And I'd like for you to share what that was all about.
Sure. So what we've had going on here locally, and then also at the state level, Karla, where running for state legislature, there are incentives given to businesses, and they're taxpayer incentives. They're our dollars. They're money that belongs to the taxpayers, and there's loopholes in these contracts. If there's not a physical exchange of money between the government body and the developer, if it's not the town or the city or the county or the state physically gives money back to the developer, then it goes around the Illinois Prevailing Wage Act. What the Illinois Prevailing Wage Act does is it sets a minimum wage for construction workers in each area. So it puts all the contractors on a level playing field that partake in training. They make sure that the workers are trained properly, and they get paid a fair wage where they can basically be a middle-class citizen. You're never going to be a rich in the top 1%, but you can have a nice home. You can have a decent vehicle. You can, have a little extra spending cash to go to our local businesses and patronize their business. So that's what the Illinois Prevailing Wage Act does. Locally, if they're not written into the contracts, and every local body could write them in, if they don't, then it does not apply.
Okay.
So what we have found, and too often we have workers coming in from other areas or other states, counties, and even other countries, and they work for far less money than what our area standards are. And once again, they're getting exploited. What we want to do, we want to raise everybody's life, socially and economically. So it's not that if you're not part of our union, we hate you. or we want to see you fail. We don't. We want to see you survive and thrive just like us. We want you to become part of our team. So at the end of the day, that's what we're after.
Right. So one of the points here is that having a union, an active union in your community, can definitely help raise the wages of non-union workers in those fields.
Yeah, and without a doubt, there's been countless times, Karla, we've been out, we talk with the non-union workers, and they go back to their boss and says, hey, the union guy's here, he has a job for me. Guess what the next time they get a paycheck, they've gotten a little bit of a raise. So it does happen. It happens quite frequently.
Sure.
There's people that, for whatever reason, just don't want to be involved in a union, and they use our relationship to go back to their boss and say, hey, I talked with Mike over there again, and next thing you know, he got another $1 an hour raise. So, oh no, that's fine. If it helps them out, more power to them.
Right. Well, yeah, and as a candidate and a resident in Central Illinois, I know that our economy is going to be stronger if people are actually paid a living wage. And I'll say it now and I'll say it again later. I want to see more people represented by unions and more people given the kinds of protections that union workers have with the wages and the hours and the breaks.
Very good. Well, thank you.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna bring on Anthony. Well, is it Anthony Walraven or Walraven?
Yeah, it's like the word wall and the word raven, and they smush together.
Walraven.
Falls off.
Okay.
Yep.
Walraven. All right. Well, hi, Anthony. Thank you so much for joining us. I met Anthony back in January, I think it was, or perhaps February, pre-COVID. We were doing a training together, and I was very taken by your enthusiasm and your passion for social justice. And so we have been friends ever since. And I happened to notice just a couple of weeks ago that Anthony joined AFSCME, and I wanted him to come and tell us about that, about being a new union member.
Yeah. So I am now a fourth generation union member.
Okay.
One of my great grandfathers was a coal miner. My grandpa Walraven helped organize the union at Keystone, which is a union called the Independent Steelworkers Alliance. My dad was a member of that. He was also a member of UAW Local 974, which is the Caterpillar Union in Peoria. And so, I'm a member of AFSCME Local 3464, which is the union that represents the employees of the city of Peoria and their as a local negotiating with the city of Peoria. We have workers from the city of Peoria, the Peoria Public Library, the Peoria Housing Authority, and one other group, which the Peoria Civic Center Authority. So there's a few jobs in the Civic Center that are actually unionized, and they are also represented by our local as well. So we have just under 300 members, and AFSCME and a lot of unions like it are a little bit different. They're what used to be called industrial unions. And so where you have trade unions that represent people who all do the same, like it's a skill, you learn to be an electrician, you learn to be a carpenter. An industrial union organizes all the employees of a certain company. So like the UAW was once considered like an industrial union. That's what the CIO and AFL-CIO means. CIO is the Congress of Industrial Organizations. And they merged with the AFL in 1956. But yeah, I mean, I'm from Peoria, I'm lifelong Peorian, and you can trace the fortunes of my town
Mm-hmm.
through the number of union employees that were in the town. So, when I was born in 1984, Local 974, I think they had almost 30,000 active working members. Now they
Mm-hmm.
have about 6,000. And
Okay.
that kind of will tell you the story, the economic story of Peoria.
Right.
And it was replaced by jobs, by medical jobs,
Mm-hmm.
hospitals and stuff like that, which are non-union. And
Mm-hmm.
so, some of what what people call unskilled labor, custodians, people who prepare
Mm-hmm.
food, even nurses. None of those jobs are unionized in Peoria. Now they are in some parts of the country, but they're not in
Mm-hmm.
Peoria. And so, you can really trace the growing economic and also really honestly the growing racial economic disparity of Peoria through the decline of its labor unions. And so, I worked at a bank prior to this, and I'm a dispatch. I'm a 911 dispatcher for the city is what I do. So I really leapt at the chance to join a union and work in a unionized environment where I have a little bit more say in my workplace. I definitely have more economic security, both
Mm-hmm.
immediately and then in the long term.
Mm-hmm.
And you build solidarity with the people around you and with the community around you in a way that really is if you go from not being in one to being in one, it's very noticeable.
Right, right. So how long had you been a dispatcher before, did you have to work as a dispatcher for a certain amount of time before you were allowed to join or invited?
So
How does that work?
yeah. So ASME's contract with the city provides that within 30 days of an employee being hired, a ASME representative can reach out to them and set up a meeting to kind of go over the union.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, with the Janus versus ASME decision, you can become what's called a free rider, which is you can assume all of the benefits of union membership without having to contribute anything towards actually being in the union,
Mm-hmm.
which to me is despicable. So at that meeting, I was allowed to sign my membership card and turn it in. Now, my particular job has a probationary period of 6 months. So after a 6-month period, I cease becoming an at-will employee, and then my employment is regulated by the contract that the union has negotiated with the city. For some jobs, it's 3 months. For some jobs, it's actually as long as 18 months. But at that
Okay.
6-month period, I will actually become I can't be fired for any reason. They would have to follow the grievance process as listed in the
Yeah.
contract.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned at will. Uh, I did not realize that Illinois was an at will state.
Mm-hmm.
And that means that if you're not in a union or you don't have some other protection as part of a contract, you can be fired for any reason
Oh yeah,
in
absolutely.
Illinois, and that
Yeah.
just blew my mind. I did not know that was a thing, and that is a thing that as a state representative, I'd really like to take a look at that and say, hey, has anybody tried to change this and make it better for the workers of the state of Illinois? Because that doesn't seem right.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and I mean, and obviously there's economic benefits to joining a union, right? You get paid more, you have better security in terms of retirement and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I will honestly say one of the things that's most attractive to me is you have a greater say in what goes on in your workplace.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you've ever worked for a boss that was malicious, or they picked on people for no reason, or they had rules that didn't make sense, or they asked you to do things you felt were unsafe or
Mm-hmm.
unwise, and you had to
Mm-hmm.
do them because they could just fire you if you didn't. If you are in a union, there are a lot of protections you have and a lot of processes that you can go through where you are allowed to express your opinion about the things that are going on in your workplace. And the reason you're able to do that is because of again, everybody that works there is stronger when they are one unit of people versus a bunch of like individuals all trying to, like little lobsters trying to get their individually out of the pot, So
Yeah.
to me,
Yeah.
like that, the greater say in the workplace is almost
Mhm.
just as important as the added wages and benefits and things like that.
Yeah, I'm gonna bring Mike back in on this conversation and just ask about some of the protections, just to talk a little bit more about some of the benefits that your workers have being part of the union, and also what do the dues pay for? Because I agree, if you're going to be part of a union, you should pay the dues if you're going to get the representation and the support. You have to pay people to do that work, right?
Right. No, that's a great point. So what representation gets you is exactly your work schedule. Um, the if the employer changes it the night before by, if the normal work day is 8 o'clock and
Mm.
say, hey, you got to be here at 5 o'clock in the morning, tomorrow, it's a hardship on you and your family. Okay, it's gonna cost you.
Mhm.
There's overtime protection in that, right? Um, they can't just come up and change your schedule or your rate of pay. If
Mhm.
when things are going really well, businesses may not, uh, you know, they'll pay you, but when times are a little bit tough, there's your contract is written in there. So you know exactly what you're getting. One of the key things is in society right now with income inequality, especially females, minorities, it doesn't matter. When you belong to a union, age isn't a restriction. Um, race,
Right.
gender, there is, everybody gets paid the same.
Mhm.
So there's some very good protections in that. And
Right.
then not only that, health insurance, there's a big
Mhm.
debate. Obviously, there's a huge problem in health insurance.
Right.
One of the things that we do see is that we do have good health insurance. If a family or a person needs it at this point, we can go to the doctor and we're not going to become bankrupt right now.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then pension benefits. You work your whole life, your twilight of your career, you want to be able to retire and retire with dignity. You don't,
Mhm.
you want to be able to do maybe a little bit of traveling, spend time with your family or your friends. You can do that if you belong to a union because you're going to have a pension when it's that time.
Right. And you're talking about the the hours and changing your time that you report to work and your hours. It reminds me that when I did work in New York in the union, that they had to tell us by 3 o'clock or there was a certain time of day. It may have been 3 o'clock. It may have been a little earlier than 3 o'clock. If you were on for the next day, there was a deadline for that, because it wasn't. The work wasn't guaranteed. The kind of work that I was doing, it was day to day. But if they were gonna lay you off, they had a time that they had to let you know. And you know if you worked a long day, you got a meal break, a generous meal break, and time and a half, double time, if you came in on a weekend or a holiday, double time. That was amazing. um and
Yeah, and that's what.
Yeah,
Oh,
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry to cut you off,
No,
but
no, go right
that's
ahead.
what unions have done. They
Mhm.
created the 5-day work week, 40 hours worth of pay, and anything else weekend time and anything over 8 hours should be overtime. There's, the social part of our lives we need to lift up. We need to be able to spend time with our families and our friends. And it doesn't matter what you do in your free time, but you should be able to enjoy it. You shouldn't have
Right.
to work to live. You should be able to,
Yeah.
you know, so.
Yeah. So Anthony, do you have health insurance through AFSCME?
Yeah, yeah, I do. And it's good health insurance. I would probably, just my own personal preference is that if we had a Medicare for all system and we could remove health insurance as something that we had to bargain with the boss about, I think
Right.
we could just focus on wages and working conditions, because sometimes they like to pit one against the other. But I have good insurance, and and when working like service industry jobs and things like that, just to give you an example of like one of the ways, like a union versus a non-union environment. If you've ever worked for a retail company, you know that they steal maybe 15 to 30 minutes of your day every day, and they don't pay you. It's wage theft. The largest like theft in the United States is wage theft from hourly workers that work for non-union places. So in my job, if I stay 1 minute past my scheduled amount of time, I'm paid 15 minutes of overtime. As a result, workers are not made to stay after their scheduled shift ends,
Right.
because it has to pay us at least, they pay us for a half an hour's worth of work. So, every other job I had prior to that, it was like, okay, I know your shift is like 2 to 10. I need you to come in at 1:45 and do a bunch of stuff, and we're not going to pay you for it. We're also going to make you clock out for all your breaks. We're going to follow you around and make sure that
Yeah.
So, and those are very demeaning things to kind of have to put up with day in and day out as you kind of go in and work. So, those kind of things are things that are very noticeable for someone who goes from a non-union work environment to a union work environment. But I think another thing that's kind of important to talk about unions in general is I think that there's a stereotype of what a union worker is. And I think the stereotype is it's someone like my dad or someone like my grandpa, where, they got a hard hat on and a lunch pail, and they go into the factory and they pull a thing at 8, and then the whistle blows at 5 and they come out. In reality, the average like composite demographic of a union employee in the United States is a black woman.
Cool.
It's certainly true.
I love that.
It's certainly true in unions like the SEIU, which is like a service. It's called
what is
Service
that one?
Employees International Union.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It's certainly true in AFSCME. My local's leadership is entirely female, and a lot of them are women of color. Teachers unions. The Chicago Teachers Union, one of the best unions in the entire country, has a large portion of its members are female, women of color. And so when people talk about union households is like, these kind of
it's not necessarily patriarchal,
is it? Way.
Right?
No. And so like, union issues are the issues of the entire working class. And so when we talk about social justice issues and we talk about like bond reform, those are issues that unions should have a lot to say about, because a lot of their members suffer under a bond system that makes you pay for your freedom. When we talk about pay differentials between men and women, that's a union issue. That's a working class issue, because you have a lot of union members who are female. So, I think that one of the great strengths of the labor movement in the United States is that it is probably a better composite of what the actual working class is than any other segment that you can group people into. There are longshoremen hauling out ships in Washington State that refuse to load ships to South Africa in the 80s. You had the union that my dad was a member.
Wow.
The International Longshoremen and Warehousing Union refused to load ships from South Africa several times in the 80s in protest of apartheid. You have my union, or you have like the UAW in Peoria, that was founded as a wildcat strike, where literally workers occupied General Motors factories in Flint, Michigan, and didn't come out until the company endorsed the union. The UAW also helped to fund the civil rights movement in the 40s and 50s, because they recognized that workers' rights is more than just the rights of our individual members. It's the rights of the working class. So I think unions can be a powerful or they should be a powerful voice for social justice in their communities, because, you know, I feel like just as a rank and file member, you know, what happens to the members of my union when they go home to their neighborhoods affects me because I am a part of their union. I am one of them. So.
Right. That's wonderful. I'm so glad you brought that up. As a candidate, I receive a lot of questionnaires from different groups, so they can assess if they want to endorse me or not. And of all the questionnaires I have filled out, the UAW had the most intense, direct, strong social justice questions on this questionnaire. And I just found it so exciting that an auto workers and aerospace workers union is, you know, has such strong stances on social justice. It's awesome. I'm going to ask Mike, how's the diverse? Oh, Blair's popping on, so I think there's probably a question. Should I?
I'm being annoying because it's actually my question.
It's your question. Go right ahead. I'll remember.
I've worked in a lot of different places. I've worked in grocery stores when I was younger. Grocery stores and retail being most of it. And I remember like I was in college, I didn't really care, but I ended up having a short conversation about why unions were actually good, because people were saying really negative things about them in the sense that they were like, they just take your money and blah, blah, blah. And I was amazed that everyone had such strong opinions about them, while no one was part of a union. No one had ever been in a union.
Yeah.
And I was so surprised by that. And then additionally, I was surprised by the fact that one of my managers materialized out of nowhere and was suddenly glaring at me. And because I was talking about the incredible benefits of unions, and also how much better some stores were unionized and some weren't, and how much better that other store had it because they were unionized. And so my question for you is, if you are not currently part of a union, what advice would you give to people who would like to be part of one and have those protections?
Well,
anybody.
Yeah, I'm gonna let Mike take that, because I was gonna ask you actually about like recruiting people and doing outreach to make sure that your union is diverse and represents our people.
Right. No, great point and good question, Blair. How would people go about it? It depends what they want to do. As far as if it was a grocery store worker, unions represent different sectors. So that would be the United Food and Commercial Workers, I believe, UFCW. We have a lot of acronyms. I know the acronyms,
right,
not the actual names, but also if it was a trade union, you know, especially electrical, I can definitely tell you how to become a electrician or a plumber, pipe fitter, carpenter, a laborer, a sheet metal worker. You just do a quick Google search of what area you're at and what trade you want to get involved with. And pretty much everybody these days have updated websites, contact information to contact the union. I know we do have some non-traditional areas that we represent. You know, there's maintenance workers in different places that the IBW represents. There are clerical workers in some instances that the IBW will represent. There's some nurses in Canada that the IBW represents.
Oh,
yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So basically, if you know anybody in the union, ask them who to talk to. And I would say that's probably the best bet, because no matter what, we can kind of point you in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Yeah.
outreach,
Go ahead.
if I can talk on the outreach.
Please.
Yeah, we encourage minorities to apply and we acknowledge that we need to be more diverse in the trade unions. I can speak for because that's what I'm part of. We do need more diversity amongst our ranks, and we are actively trying to do that. So please, if you know people,
Yeah.
then send them our way.
Great.
I
Yeah.
would actually like to kind of, I'm going to put this in the chat.
Oops. Lost your mic. You
Let me
bumped it.
unmute myself. Sorry.
Yeah, you bumped
So
it.
I just shared it in the chat. It's something called the Emergency Workers Organizing Committee. It
Okay.
is a joint effort between the United Electrical Workers, which is not a union of electricians. It's a union of people that work in like factories, like GE factories.
Okay.
But it's basically a kind of a clearinghouse for people who work in non-unionized workplaces that are interested in possibly organizing their workplaces. Because you're right, the vast majority of Americans do not work in unionized workplaces, and much like in the 1930s when there was a last great wave of unionization, there's a lot of workers in large scale industries that are just not unionized at all. Restaurant workers, stuff like that. So, if people were interested in seeing kind of a successful union drive that sprouted up not out of nowhere, Anchor Steam Brewing, which is a pretty popular craft brewery in San Francisco. It's actually one of the oldest craft breweries in the nation. Their employees just last year, voted to join the International Longshoremen and Warehouse Union. They're the first they're the first union craft brewery in the United States. And so the first thing to do, they usually say, is to get a list of all the employees that work in your organization. So, if you like work at a fast food place, get a list of everybody that works at your place. But yeah, reaching out to a union that's already in the area is a good idea. Like I said, the link I shared is another good kind of resource where you'll actually be contacted by an organizer and who can walk you through some of the processes if you have any questions. But yeah, like we are not going to get to where we need to be economically as a country, or really socially as a country, until we get a larger number of people actually joining unions. And so that's why I think it's awesome that unions like the IBEW do as much good, awesome stuff as they do outreach, and other unions across the country, because we need the number to be bigger. We need the depth of what we're doing to be like deeper, and we need the pool of people to be bigger, because that is what is going to actually extract concessions from capital. It is kind of people like to say it's not a zero-sum game, but in a lot of ways it is a zero-sum game, and we've seen what 30 years of the other side winning looks like.
Yeah, I can remember. I'm a child of the 80s, and I can remember watching the factories close down. I moved to Moline, Illinois when I was 12, and right when I moved there, John Deere laid off a bunch of people, and then we had the Reagan years followed by the Bush years, and they were so anti-union and just did everything possible to make it harder. And honestly, our wages in the United States have not kept up with inflation. I think the 1970s was probably the last time where uh, wages and cost of living were at a good place. And then you couple that with spiraling health costs, and and that we're spending more and more for healthcare. I mean, it's wonderful that we have unions that have negotiated good healthcare for their workers, but as a whole, our country would be so much better off if we had some form of universal health care. I lived in England for 10 years, and I got to benefit from universal health care. And what a difference that makes. I mean, on one hand, I really missed my entertainment union, because when I moved there, I was not able to make the same kind of wage doing the same kind of work, because there was no union to set those wages for me. And that's why I started doing interior house painting, because I could charge more. But on the other hand, I could be an entrepreneur and just go from one thing to another. I could do some house painting, I could do some murals, I could go and, like, I went and did a painted scenery on a video for Paul McCartney. I could move around and do that work because I didn't have to worry about health insurance. It wasn't tied to my job. It made it easier for me to be creative with my work when I didn't have a steady union to help me find the kind of work that I prefer to do.
And those are great points. And Anthony brought up a point earlier today when he was talking basically about universal health care. If unions aren't having to bargain for insurance, we can bargain for strictly wages and conditions. And
That's right.
that's huge. So I don't, even though we have good insurance, you know, there's a better system out there. I would agree.
Right. Yeah. It would be for the greater good.
Yeah.
if we could achieve some kind of universal health care.
Right.
Well, and
Go ahead.
well, I was going to say another thing it does, and I just speak, I guess, to this from like my perspective in Peoria, is if we don't have to bargain for healthcare, we aren't pitting the retirees against the active workers.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that happens in these contracts as well is they try to pit, okay, so you don't have to pay extra for your healthcare, but we're going to make retirees pay extra for their healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and you know, anything that we don't have to deal with is any negotiation. Like Mike said, if you don't have to bargain about it, then you can bargain. You can put all of your efforts towards the other stuff. And you know, I think if nothing else, this, I would hope that this economic crisis brought on by COVID would show people how precarious insurance tied to your employment can actually be.
That's right.
When I switched from my job at the bank to my job with the city, I was offered the opportunity to purchase COBRA insurance through the bank for like the month and a half gap before my insurance kicked in. And I mean, it was just an absurd amount of money. I mean, it was like it was like $1,200, you know, for a month and a half worth of coverage. And it's just like, you know, that's just not feasible for most people. And so I you know, I don't know what can be done about that on the state level. Obviously, I think that national healthcare system.
Oh, I'm going to look into it. You better
but,
believe it.
I mean, there are a lot of, like, you know, there's a lot of really good things that could be done. You're absolutely right. And again, those are workers' issues. Healthcare
yes, they
is a
are.
workers' issue.
Yes,
You
it
know,
is. Yes,
environment's a workers' issue because my daughter is too, and I don't want her to live in a state that's just toxic and polluted. You know, like, you know, you've got them, they're shutting down these nuclear power plants that are producing clean energy to keep their coal-fired nasty power plants open. That was just in the news today, you know, and that affects union jobs as well. So, I mean, like, like they're like it, when we say like workers issues, you know, and things that affect workers, it is all of it, all the pieces fit together in my opinion. And I think like we limit ourselves when we kind of say like, well, workers issues are just like issues that affect what we do at work. You know, it's all of it. And I think like having more people like you, you know, going from someone like Keith Summers to going to someone like you would be a complete net benefit for the state of Illinois. And I don't even live in your district. You know what I mean? Like it would be a benefit for me.
Thank
and
you.
I have a pretty good rep in Representative Gordon Booth. So like, that's how I feel about it.
Yeah. Blair, have we got some questions or comments?
Yes. There's actually been some people who are saying that they are in a union and happy about it.
Mhm.
And then I also wanted to just mention this personally. Something that I've been seeing happen a lot in our community as well as other communities is, especially with what's going on in the media right now with Black Lives, and I think we've been seeing a lot of people being punished for supporting Black lives and
Mhm.
for asking for diversity in the workplace, and a lot of fear from people I know about coming and saying that I would like a more, I'd like more diverse workplace. I'd like people to stop making racist comments. And the thing is that stinks is you don't have anybody to fight for you. So it's you standing alone. And then and I've been in that position and it is miserable.
Mhm.
And I just have to say, like, how I wonder how much more could get done in the event that you had someone in your union you could go to and say, this is an issue for me, and then other
Mhm.
people in the union could come forward and say, this is also an issue for me, and then it could be dealt with, versus them being like, oh, because we're a right to work state, you don't want to be too much of a problem, you don't want to create too many issues because they can fire you because they just don't like looking at you. And I know that my girlfriend got let go from a job once, and someone actually said that to her. They said, by law, we don't have to tell you why we're letting you go. And it was a personal thing.
Yeah.
And I just find that absolutely reprehensible. And to think that there are avenues that would prevent this from happening, that could stop this and could help people, and we aren't utilizing them because of, I'm sure, smear campaigns by people who don't like them, considering how hard they fought to stop unions from becoming widespread. And to stop unions from becoming widespread in the beginning. I mean, my goodness, Anthony, your family is union royalty. I mean, my goodness, the coal workers really paved the way and
Mhm.
and really endured a lot of personal stuff. So Karla and I were actually talking about that a little bit the other day.
Mhm.
So anyway, I just wanted to
Yeah.
say I thought it would be really great if we could deal with that right to work issue
Yes. It at will.
at will.
At
Sorry.
will. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. I definitely want to look into it. And going back to the Medicare for all, universal health care, um, someone did proposed that in the Illinois state legislature, but unfortunately, because of COVID and the shutdown, it just got stuck in committee. But I definitely want to revisit that, and I definitely want to look at how can the state of Illinois make our healthcare coverage, our healthcare system better for our residents. And Mike, I wanted to ask you, so let's say one of your workers was on a job and somebody was making racist comments. Who do they go to at your union to report that and get help? And hi, little people.
Yeah, my 8, 9-year-old are wanting to get in on the conversation, I think.
Hmm.
So they would, we have stewards on job sites, and they would contact the steward. A steward is basically a representative of the union hall, and they are protected. Um, so they are allowed on company time to conduct union business, to talk with other coworkers to find out if there's issues or problems, and they would contact their steward, or they would just give us a call out at the union hall, and then we'd be doing a job site visit to see what's going on.
Okay, so that's another point about or benefit to being part of a union is that you've got a system there to have your back and to protect you.
You got it.
All right. Did I think I covered everything. What one thing that this pandemic has really shown us is how undervalued our home health care workers are, our gig workers, our child care workers, and people who work for companies like Walmart. Walmart's kind of the big fish, but there's a lot of other, big box stores, or even the little stores like Dollar General, where all other stores were shut down for everyone's health and safety, and yet these people still had to go to work. And I definitely support, and I would like to spearhead, if possible, getting more of these gig workers and these essential workers covered by unions, part of unions, or at the very least, valued. We need to value them more, and part of that is paying them a living wage.
Hi, somebody brought up Mitch McConnell's proposal that he had up about where he was making people not liable for, like, making the employers not liable if their workers got sick and they were not taking care of them during COVID. And they were just wondering what your response was to that. And
Yeah, that's so it disappoints me that they feel like they have to legislate that, that they feel like it's important to protect businesses in that way, and to value the business owner over the worker. So I don't like it. I don't know. Mike and Anthony, do you want to weigh
Yeah,
in on this?
well, definitely, it's totally anti-worker. It's definitely a pro-business way to look at things. Trump's National Labor Relations Board, if we're talking about union issues as well, the president controls, he appoints the National Labor Relations Board, and they set the rules and the standards um, for the workplace, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And it's supposed to be two or three Republicans and two or three Democrats. So it's supposed to be evenly matched. However, he hasn't appointed any Democrats. There's 2 vacancies on there. So right now it's 3-1. So surprise, surprise, the NLRB ruled that employers don't have to bargain over COVID related items in the middle of a contract. And then the Department of Labor took the same stance as McConnell, that employers are not liable for COVID related problems.
Right. I think my biggest concern is for places where we've seen big COVID outbreaks, like meat processing plants, where the business owner wants everything to keep going, but if Mitch McConnell gets his way and that business owner gets a free pass, then you're endangering the lives of a lot of workers, and then in turn all of the people that they go home to, whether it's their partner, their children, their parents, if they're caretakers for parents, or it's very disappointing. All right, are there any other questions or comments that we should address before we say goodnight?
Nope, I think most people just are supportive is really the messages that I am getting, or just that people are grateful and thankful, and they'd like to start them in their own. So thank you, Anthony, for sharing that link, because that is awesome.
Yes, that's great. Thank you.
I would say there are a couple of things we could do at the state level that could help unions.
Yep, please.
Number one, we could make it so that municipalities can't have we can tighten the amount of the amount of unions that can have no strike clauses in their contracts. A strike is the most important weapon that a union has, as you saw with like the basketball players and the baseball players. The right to withhold your labor is really, without it, there's not really, I mean, a union is significantly weaker. Allowing unions to negotiate for things that are not considered workplace conditions. The Chicago Teachers Union, by state law, when they go on strike, they have to be very careful about what they say they are going on strike for, because there's state laws that prohibit them, that constrain what they can negotiate in their contract. That could be removed at a state level. We could have things, the city of Chicago already did this. We could have fair scheduling laws implemented at a state level, where employees had to be given 2 weeks notice of what their schedule was. And if the schedule was changed, they had to be compensated for it. There are lots of things that could be done at the state, at the Illinois level, that would help unions that already exist, help workers who may not yet be in unions, and also because I'm in a public sector union, and they're very often demonized by people for doing work that is necessary for civil society to exist. You know, there are things that can be done to fund our pensions. My pension is pretty well funded. The IMRF is funded at like 97%. But one of the reasons why we have a pension crisis is the state failed to fund pensions for decades. So, you know, getting legislators in office that are not going to kick that can down the road, and pass it.
Borrow pension money, because that happened too.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. And so, like, you know, there are things that can be done, and it's why, like, electing better representatives than what we have is so important. And you really can't do much worse than what you have in the 88th district if you are a working class person. So if you are watching this, I would urge, I'm sorry, I'll get a plug in for you. I would urge everyone to vote for you. Like the 88th Assembly District.
Yes. Thank you so much. And I also want to put in a plug for Saturday night. Anthony is going to host a labor history trivia night, and we're going to start at 6:30 to have a happy half hour, just kind of like an informal meet and greet, and then we'll start the game at 7. And part of the reason for this is, I tell you, if we say we're starting it at 7, people will trickle in and trickle in and trickle in, and then we won't get started until 7:30. So 6:30, and the game starts at 7.
How do you participate?
Good question, Mike. Thank you. So you can go to my website, which is unite88.org, and click on the event link, and then you can buy a ticket. I do want you to buy a ticket, but the tickets start at just $1. So if you're on a low income or you're struggling, you can just buy a ticket for $1. All proceeds go to the campaign to help us with voter outreach, with digital ads and print material to share with people and get the word out about the campaign, and also about voting information. The material that I'm handing out in Tazewell County has voter information on the back: how to register, where to find your polling place, and you know, all of the relevant voting information for your area. So please, go ahead.
Add in that in the event that you are deeply affected by COVID and you are unable to pay the dollar, please send a message to our Facebook, like our Facebook group, and we will happily work with you. Like, we do not want the dollar to, if you're overdrafted or whatever,